I hurried down the clean hallway of Adams High, my bag slamming against my side with each step. The halls seemed to go on forever. My chemistry report wasn't going to write itself, and I didn't want Mr. Wilson to talk about personal responsibility again. It was strangely still and quiet inside the building on a Friday afternoon, with fluorescent lights buzzing like a crazy bug chorus. I was almost at my locker when I thought I heard a faint sound coming from further down the hall. I stopped and strained my ears to hear anything else over the noise of the lights. There's nothing. I shook my head as I turned the lock's combination. It must have been my imagination going wild in these empty spaces. But as I opened the metal door, I heard a loud bang coming from behind me. As I spun around with wide eyes, my heart jumped into my throat. A dark figure came out from behind a row of lockers about halfway down the hallway and quickly went back into the shadows. As I searched for whatever or whoever had made the noise, adrenaline rushed through my body. There was silence, and then the sound of shoes hitting tile woke me up. What other people could be here? I knew I shouldn't look into it, but my thought was full of bad ideas. I crept down the hallway, stopping at each row of lockers to look around for the source of the sounds. I stayed low so as not to be seen. As I got closer to where I saw the dark figure, a locker door slammed shut with a loud noise, and then I heard heavy footsteps coming toward me. My instinct to run took over, and panic broke through my aware mind. As fast as my legs would take me down the hall, I prayed that the door to my classroom would be open so I could hide. Behind me, hard breathing and the sound of shoes slapping against floor tiles closed in very quickly. When I looked back over my shoulder, I saw a huge shape chasing me, but I couldn't make out its features because of the darkness. I ran into my chem room just as rough hands grabbed at nothing where I'd been. The door was wide open. Thank God. With my heart beating, I quickly turned the lock, keeping whatever or whoever was outside out. For a scary moment, all I could hear was raspy breathing coming from the other side of the door, like a wild animal trying to catch something. Then there were heavy footsteps coming down the hall with a mean, sneaky purpose. As I came to, I fell to the floor and pressed my back against the cool metal door. I was locked in my classroom by myself and couldn't get out. Someone or something was in the school with me. Behind rows of lab desks across the room, my phone was stuck in my bag and couldn't be reached. Without calling for help, it wouldn't come. But if I moved, I might be seen through the door's small window. In the dark hallways, someone or something was looking for me. How long would it be before they found where I was hiding? As I looked out the small window, I was scared and excited at the same time. Outside, the hallway was empty, and the lights were flashing in a way that looked like strobes, which made me sick. I caught glimpses of shadows moving in a strange way along the far wall during the flashes of light. It felt like something big was watching me from behind the wall, waiting for me to do something stupid. The automatic lockdown message came over the P system with a weak buzzing sound. And then Mr. Wilson's calm voice came over. Students and staff, pay attention. This is a code red security alert. Please take cover right away and wait for further orders. My blood froze over. I was stuck. That thing was running around the halls, and I had no idea when or if help would arrive before it found me hiding in this classroom. I could only hope that it moved on and left me alive long enough for help to come, if it got there at all. Even though the harsh electric lights outside my classroom door didn't show anyone moving, I still wasn't brave enough to get my phone from across the room. I could have sat there frozen with fear for hours, overthinking every little sound the old school building made. The fact that I could see my breath in the cold air showed how scared I was getting. After an unknown amount of time, sharp pains from hunger cut through my stress. I didn't eat lunch because I was studying and thought it would be okay to be hungry. Now my things were stuck too. A breakfast bar and a water bottle were in my bag under those desks, just out of reach. My thoughts went back to that weird shadow moving along the wall of the hallway earlier. In what way did that person or thing move? That wasn't natural. terrorizing a student by themselves on a Friday afternoon wasn't an accident. This person broke in to hurt others and wasn't stopped by morals or the law. I was thinking when I heard a loud banging sound. When I slammed the door and looked through the small window, I saw a form that looked like a person throw a trash can down the hall in anger. The person stopped right below where I was hiding, their heavy boots sliding against the concrete as they turned to look down the empty hallway. My breath caught in my throat. Flaming lights cast a shadow on the back of a skinny man who appeared in profile. It was clear that he didn't take care of himself, because his hair was frizzy and his clothes were worn out. But it was his face that really scared me. The patchy beard and sunken eyes that screamed he was crazy. This invader wasn't like other intruders. This man was crazy and couldn't make sense. He stalked off out of sight just as quickly as he had come into view. I felt calmer, but fear still held me tight. My heart started to beat less quickly. Since breaking into the school, what else had this man done? How long had it been since he found my hidden place again? There was a psychopath on the loose, and I didn't want to give up hope that the police would soon come. A soft buzz broke the quiet. It was my phone, vibrating across the room under desks and chairs, so little that you could hear it. Had someone seen the times I asked for help on social media earlier? I wasn't going to check because I was afraid the invader would see the glow. I carefully looked through the window again and saw no movement, so I quickly ran to get my phone. Had my friend Lizzie seen my strange behavior? I missed 2 calls and 3 texts from her. What she just read. "Jamie, are you okay? I'm scared. So call me." It made me feel good to know that someone cared. But calling put me at risk of being found out. Instead, I quickly typed out a message. Stuck at school by themselves. Someone broke in and is now after me. Please send help. Don't come here because it's dangerous. Call the cops. After pressing send, I went back to my post by the door and hoped that someone else in the darkness had seen my desperate plea. Minutes went by while I kept refreshing my phone, eagerly waiting for an answer. A soft noise outside made me look away from the screen. Had anyone gotten my message in time? Or was hope fading, along with my chances of staying alive against this killer's plans? As I watched briefly as things moved outside the small window again, my breath caught in my mouth. The invader walked slowly down the hallway, scuffing his boots against the tiles as he did so. This time, he wasn't angry, but rather coldly calculating. I felt like an animal when he pushed me into this corner, and he had been playing with me for hours, and the game was almost at its peak. As the man's footsteps stopped outside my door, I closed my eyes and imagined hiding in the air vents above. I was sure I heard deep, raspy breathing and a low, moaning sound through the thin wall. It scared me to the core. What horrible thoughts were going through that evil mind, which was only a few inches away from where I was hiding? Sweet relief came in the form of an unexpected vibration. Lizzie's name flashed quickly on my screen. I took advantage of the confusion and quickly tapped to answer the call. "Liz, it's so awful. Please." Heavy footsteps came back down the hall, cutting off my forced whisper. "Could you hear me through the door?" I quickly turned my attention back to the call, panting heavily. "Is Liz there? Did you call the police?" Instead of her usual tone, I heard crackling. A dead zone, of all times, for my signal to go out. I threw my head against the door in frustration and tried to figure out what to do next while I was scared. The pipes above gave me a new possible place to hide, but getting to them would put me in that psychopath's view. But staying put meant being scared all the time while he circled around me like a buzzard. Enjoying the fear I gave off. It might work if I timed it right during his next pass. When I looked out, I didn't see any signs of movement. Now or never. I jumped on tables and chairs and smashed my fists into the vent cover above until it gave way. I climbed inside just in time for heavy footsteps to echo down the hall again. I laid on my stomach and held my breath, hoping that the thin metal walls would block out any noise. Below, boots came to a stop right under where I'd just hidden myself. I felt fear running through my veins like ice water when I heard a low laugh coming up through the vents. He was smart. Fear made my muscles stiff, and I lay there frozen in the small space, listening in horror as the invader lingered below. As he laughed softly again, each shallow breath felt like it was breaking the sound barrier. He then continued his methodical watch. He seemed to be playing with me more, but did he really know where I was hiding? Time seemed to drag on for minutes before his steps finally faded back into the distance. The air shaft didn't give much room to move, but it did give a good view of what was going on below. The hall was filled with a strange strobe of flashing emergency lights, and I strained to hear any sounds of help coming. Instead, a loud, jumbled crash could be heard far away, followed by a shrill cry that was cut off quickly. I felt scared all over again. What horrible thing was that man doing somewhere else in the empty school? I carefully crawled through the small ducts and came out into a side hall, just as the thief came into view below. His thin face was twisted with anger as he pulled a messy backpack behind him, its contents scattered all over the place. In the bright lights, I caught a glimpse of blood spatter on his worn-out arms that looked like it was paint on with a macabre brush. As I heard another low groan, my stomach turned at the thought of what it meant. He wasn't done with his evil job yet. I sped down the stairs quickly, hoping they led outside instead of back into his confusing maze, while I waited for his shaky steps to take him around a corner. Lucky for them, there was a dimly lit exit sign ahead. As I yanked open the heavy door, the gloomy light of dusk poured in, casting a shadowy light on the fields and blocking the main entry with an emergency vehicle, its lights flashing quietly. When I saw that help was so close, I felt hope come back. I crept along the edge of the building, being careful not to be seen, watching for any sign that the invader would return. When I got to the corner, I looked around to see if there were any cops, but all I saw was horror. A uniform lay slouched and still in the driver's seat as a shadow moved around inside the car, looking around carefully. He had gotten ahead of the first rescuers sent to save us all, as red and blue lights flickered across his thin face. Now only a crazy killer stood between me and my inevitable death. By shrinking back, I escaped being seen by a whisper, my mind racing to come up with a way to get away. But where could I go if that psychopath was in charge of the only way we could get there? As far away, sirens got closer and closer. A frantic thought began to form. Help might still get here in time if I could keep the thief away from the car for long enough. I calmed down and stepped out into the open, breathing and wide-eyed, like I'd just come out of hiding. You, please don't hurt me. As he got closer, his wolf-like grin made my stomach hurt, and I felt like I had to gag. Let me go. I'll give you anything you want. Just please let me live. As I cried, I walked backwards toward the fields of play, hiding in the darkness. His laugh was low and grunty, and it was filled with sick pleasure. Girl, do you think you can trick me? I can see fear in your eyes, and it's exciting. I turned to run away and screamed at the top of my voice for help that might never come. Big hands grabbed me as I avoided obstacles and pumped my legs quickly into life. Or death race to stay alive, heavy. Footsteps pounded on the grass behind me. As more emergency vehicles with sirens screaming drove through the main entrance gate, which stood out against the flashing lights. My cry got louder and more desperate, and my lungs hurt as adrenaline powered my last push. Crazy blue and red lights swirled around, shedding light on my pursuer's crazy grin, just feet behind me. Then there was a loud crack that broke the silence. When pain shot through my leg, I fell into the crowd of police officers who were storming the school. Officers swarmed the intruder with their guns drawn. Sharp barks of git on the ground cut through the confusion and flashing lights. My vision blurred as arms wrapped around me, hiding the horrifying scene happening a few yards away. Thankfully, the nightmare experience was finally over. The early morning sun came in through Willow Elementary School's barely lit windows. There was no one in Miss Allison Clark's empty classroom, and she was quickly going over her lesson plans one last time. She really wanted everything to go well on her first day as a teacher. Allison really liked her job. She had always wanted to teach kids and help them become kind, thoughtful adults. But recently, there have been a lot of stories in the news about fights happening in schools across the country. She thought about students who were scared and huddled under their desks as gunshots rang out down the hall. She shook her head to get rid of the troublesome thoughts. She told herself, "You've been ready for this. Your students will be safe with you." In spite of this, Allison's heart was racing as the first bell rang, calling everyone to their classes. And now she had her first chance to change the lives of these kids. As soon as the door opened, a bunch of happy people came in, talking excitedly about their summers. When Allison met each student, she smiled and said hello. "Hello, class. My name is Miss Clark. I'm excited to teach you this year." One boy who was shy was behind the other boys. He looked straight down at the ground as he walked to an open spot. "Hello, my name is Miss Clark. What is your name?" Her question was soft. He looked up with worry. "Sammy." "Hi, Sammy, it's great to meet you. I think we'll have a great time together." Her reassurance made him feel a little better. As the morning went on, Allison got into a nice flow as she taught simple addition and letter sounds. Her students were smart and excited, and they quickly took in the new information. Allison felt like she was getting into the swing of teaching. This could have been a waste of her time after all. During break, she saw the kids having a good time playing together in the schoolyard. Sammy stayed on the steps by himself and watched the other kids with shyness. She went over and sat down next to him. "Is everything okay, Sammy?" He kicked at a loose rock. "I miss my mommy and daddy." She put a soft hand on his back. "I know they miss you too. You're safe with me though, and it will be so much fun to learn with you." Allison felt warm inside when Sammy gave her a small smile. She knew right then that becoming a teacher was the right choice for her. It would all be worth it if she could make just one shy child feel loved and safe. News stories were getting worse all day though, and her confidence was starting to crack. During lunch, I heard on the radio that 4 students had been hurt in a shooting at a high school outside of the city. Allison tried desperately to hold back her growing worry and believe that good would win and keep her children safe. Allison was both happy and sad when the last bell rang and the rainbow-colored buses with happy kids left. She made it through her first day, and now she had to wait a long time until tomorrow. She locked the door to the classroom and looked out the window at the leaves moving slowly in the wind. There was still darkness out there, but for now, everything was calm here. When the next morning came, Mrs. Clark and her children had more of the same. As the day's lessons went on, arcade math and show and tell kept the students interested. By the middle of the morning, Willow Elementary's bright hallways were filled with happy noise. Allison was showing her kids how to properly form letters when all of a sudden an all-out alarm went off. The words code red made her heart stop. "Stay put. This isn't a practice." The happy mood disappeared in an instant, and rising fear took its place. Allison acted right away, hidden her own fears deep inside. She told the kids in a firm but kind voice, "Stay calm and do what I say. Right now, you all need to get under your desks." Whispers and cries filled the room as tiny bodies stumbled into place. Sammy was curled up in a ball with his hands over his ears to block out the noise of the alarm. Allison quietly crept up next to him and put an arm around his shaking body to protect him. "Don't say anything, it's fine." She reassured us that everything would be okay. Allison locked the classroom door and covered the windows with heavy blackout shades. She did this with the ease that comes from doing a lot of drills. Only thin beams of light from the doorframe lit up the dark room. Allison's thoughts were racing as she tried to figure out what was going on. It was never seen in school to have an active shooter drill. It had to be true, which meant that lives were really at risk inside these walls. It made her heart race to think that there were kids and teachers somewhere where she had nowhere to hide. In the corner, Billy heard a desk scrape and peeked out to ask, "What's going on?" Allison put her finger to her mouth to be quiet as the little boy's face lit up with shock. Allison looked out the small window slot while holding Sammy closer and hoping that all she saw were emergency vehicles coming to fix a false alarm. Instead, she saw two covered figures coming toward the locked classroom door with shaky, uneven steps. Someone held up an object that looked scary in the filtered light. A gun. Allison let out a gasp and pulled Sammy's head close to her chest to block his view. The invaders tried to break in by hitting the door hard and shaking it. A grave voice slurred, "Let us in." And then there was raspy, hysterical laughing. Little hearts were racing with fear as terrified whispers spread under the desks. Allison felt helpless because she couldn't help or comfort her students and couldn't even make a sound for fear of calling the monsters closer. One of the attackers smashed through the door with his weapon, making it lurch and break into pieces. Allison spun around quickly and quietly moved desks out of the way to hide the crawlspace tunnel, just as heavy boots walked in. The hooded man yelled as he looked around the dark room. Allison put both hands over Sammy's mouth to block out his shaky sobs and curled up as close to his small body as she could. She had a lot of questions that she would never be able to answer. The most important question was how long she and her kids could stay in this nightmare, praying for help but not seeing anyone, before violence found them in the dark. But there were no answers. They had to wait in agony as chaos and damage grew around them. As the thieves searched, their stomping feet rang menacingly through the crowded classroom as they pushed chairs out of the way. Allison desperately held on to Sammy, and she worked hard to slow down her racing breathing. The teacher had to be strong for her children, even though she was scared herself. A heavy boot hit where they were hiding, shaking the desks just inches away from Allison's head. As the man bent down to look into the dark, she curled up even tighter around Sammy and couldn't hold back a whimper. The man in the hood then turned around in shock when a shot went off somewhere down the hall. He yelled at his partner, "Fuck, we gotta go." Both of them walked out quickly, leaving the opening wide open. Allison carefully crawled out from under the desks on shaky legs after counting to 10. As she led the kids out one by one for a number, soft sobbing came from the other dark hiding places. She asked in a shaking voice, "Is everyone here?" A number of shaky nods confirmed that all 7 students were safe, even though many of them had cuts and bruises from the hasty crawl through broken furniture. Allison pushed back the rising flood and wiped her eyes with hands that were shaking. "Okay, please. Be quiet and move quickly. Go with me in single file to the safe area behind the bookshelves." From far away, more shots could be heard, which made them move quickly but quietly. Allison squished herself into a small space in the corner and stared blankly at the doorway. She was ready to use her body to protect her kids from any new threats. They could hear screams and running feet from far away. She prayed that help would come soon. Just hold on a little longer. Heavy beating could be heard from the outside as police called for people inside. "The police? Is there anyone hurt inside?" Allison found her voice, even though it was shaking because she was letting go of stress. "Look at us. 7 kids and a teacher. Please move quickly." Officers rushed through with a lot of heavy gear and guns drawn. The suspects ran out the back. "Do you feel bad?" When cops saw the messy, bloody group huddled behind their teacher for safety, they helped quickly lead the kids outside to where the ambulances were waiting. When Allison saw the school again, it was a mess of flashing lights and chaos. Her legs gave out. Paramedics swarmed the scene and asked the same questions over and over while checking vital signs and putting shock blankets around the person. 2 deaths were confirmed down the hall. By some chance, no one in her class was hurt beyond minor cuts. Allison caught a glimpse of Sammy across the lot, safe and sound between his crying parents. When he looked at her, his eyes lit up with thanks, and she had to pull away before her feelings got too strong. Her mind kept going over everything, searching each tense moment for something she could have done differently to help save lives. But after the horror, there were no easy answers. All that could be done was pray that the darkness that had been haunting these school halls would finally go away. Allison and her kids had a hard time remembering the weeks after the lockdown. They were all required to go to counseling on a daily basis as they dealt with the trauma in their own unique ways. Sammy slowly came out of his shell. Telling Allison and close friends about what happened to him gave him strength. Volunteers from all over the area came together and fixed up the classroom's walls, making it a peaceful place to be again. By the time winter break came around, most of the cuts on the outside had healed, but there were still dark shadows behind the holiday cheer. Allison took time off until the new year and spent a lot of time talking to the families of victims and community leaders. Her desire to protect children grew stronger after she lost a loved one in an awful tragedy. It turned into a single-minded determination to change lax security policies through lobbying and advocacy. As soon as the new school year started, Allison gave each student a soothing smile and a light squeeze on the hand. Some clung to their parents unwillingly when they dropped them off, looking over their shoulders with fear, while others jumped right back into the structured routine. There would be bumps in the road on the way to progress, but emotions would rise and fall as long as they were talked about openly. In the middle of February, the anniversary of that terrible day came around. Allison kept things light and let the kids deal with things in any way they needed, whether it was through art, writing, or quiet thought. There were counselors around to help if they needed it. After school, there was a solemn memorial where families came together to dedicate a live memorial garden on the newly remodeled grounds. Even the shyest students were able to heal when they shared their stories with trusted listeners. Sammy now smiled at everyone, every day helping the younger kids get used to the friendly classroom community. Allison's spirits were lifted even when things were hard because of little wins like this. By the end of the school year in June, the wall of fear and trauma that had seemed impossible to break down was beginning to fall apart. Care, trust, and resiliency were being built up one brick at a time, even though there were scars and risks outside the gates that could never be ignored. The kids inside felt safe and could grow up to be their full, happy selves again. Allison watched with a heavy heart as the last bell rang and students rushed into their parents' arms. She knew she had found her calling and would spend every day educating young people and protecting harmless people from harms they couldn't stop. Even though darkness can sometimes get in the way of progress, they could light the way to a better future when they worked together. That Tuesday morning was like any other in my humdrum high school life. The clock on the classroom wall seemed frozen, each tick mocking my restlessness. Mr. Henderson droned on about the Civil War, but my mind was 1,000 miles away, plotting an escape from the stifling boredom. Glancing around, I noticed the usual. Jenny scribbling in her notebook, probably another love letter to her crush. Mark, the class jock, looking like he'd rather be anywhere but here. I felt a kinship with him at that moment. Without much thought, a reckless idea took root in my mind. The third-floor bathroom, a relic hardly ever used, whispered about for its disrepair and eerie quiet, perfect for a hideout. I'd heard stories, the kind that make you chuckle and roll your eyes, but today it beckoned me like a forbidden sanctuary. I raised my hand, feigning a grimace. Mr. Henderson, barely glancing up from his notes, waved me off. The moment I stepped into the hallway, a sense of liberation washed over me. The halls were deserted, the eerie silence a stark contrast to the usual cacophony. As I ascended the stairs to the third floor, each step felt like a small victory against the mundane. The bathroom door creaked as I pushed it open, a sound that seemed too loud in the quiet. The air was stale, the light flickering and dim. Choosing the farthest stall, I locked it and perched on the toilet seat. My feet pulled up. I chuckled to myself, a conqueror in my newfound kingdom of isolation. Minutes turned into what felt like hours. I pulled out my phone, scrolling mindlessly, the outside world reduced to pixels and memes. It was then, amidst the silence, that the P system crackled to life, jolting me from my digital stupor. Attention students and staff. The voice was terse, urgent. We are now in lockdown. This is not a drill. I repeat, this is not a drill. A chill ran down my spine, the words echoing in the confined space. Lockdown. My heart raced, but my mind rationalized. It had to be a precaution, nothing more. Maybe a drill they hadn't warned us about. Yet the gravity in the voice on the PA system suggested otherwise. As I sat there, the gravity of my situation began to dawn on me. I was alone, hidden, in a place no one would think to look. A shiver of fear mingled with a bizarre sense of thrill. The dull world outside that stall door had transformed into something unknown. Something. But little did I know, the real danger was much closer than I could have ever imagined. My heart pounded in my chest, a rapid drumbeat echoing in the confines of the bathroom stall. The PA system's words hung heavy in the air. This is not a drill. The phrase looped in my mind, a mantra of growing dread. I had expected boredom, a brief respite from the monotony of class, not a lockdown with me, trapped in a forgotten corner of the school. I held my breath, straining my ears for any sound that might clue me in on what was happening outside. But all I heard was an oppressive silence, broken only by the faint, distant hum of the school's air conditioning. It was as if the building itself had gone into hibernation, a concrete giant holding its breath. Minutes trickled by, and I found myself fighting the urge to unlock the stall door and peek outside. But fear rooted me in place. Fear of the unknown, fear of what might be lurking in the hallways of my usually uneventful high school. Then, a sound shattered the silence. A soft, almost imperceptible shuffle from the stall next to mine. My heart skipped a beat. Had someone been there all along? Or had they just arrived? I couldn't tell. All I knew was that I wasn't alone. I pressed my back against the cold stall wall, trying to make myself as small as possible. Every rational thought told me it could be another student, another soul seeking refuge. But the chilling possibility of it being someone, or something, else crept into my thoughts. The shuffle turned into a quiet, dragging sound, like the weight of a foot being slowly moved. I imagined a shadowy figure, hunched and waiting, just feet away from me. My mind raced with horror stories I'd laughed off in the past, stories of intruders and lunatics lurking in the most ordinary of places. I clutched my phone, contemplating whether to call for help or stay silent. But what if making a call drew attention? What if the person in the next stall was dangerous? The weight of my decision was paralyzing. As I sat there, frozen in a cocktail of fear and indecision, I realized that the true horror wasn't just the possibility of a threat outside the stall. It was the gnawing uncertainty, the helplessness of not knowing, the silent terror that grew with each passing second. And it was in that suffocating quiet, in the heart of my fear, that I understood something had gone terribly wrong. This was no drill. This was real. And I was in the eye of the storm, hidden yet exposed, safe yet incredibly vulnerable. Time crawled in the suffocating stillness of the bathroom. The eerie silence was a thick veil, masking the chaos that I imagined was unfolding outside. My cramped refuge felt more like a prison now, the walls closing in with every passing second. The murmurs of distant voices and the occasional sound of hurried footsteps started to penetrate the silence. I strained to make sense of the muffled words, to piece together the situation unraveling beyond my hideout. Were they police, teachers, or something worse? Then a sudden commotion erupted, a cacophony of running feet and shouted orders. It was so close yet unintelligible, like a nightmare spoken in a foreign language. My heart raced as I envisioned armed officers storming the hallways, searching for an unseen threat. In the stall next to me, there was a shift, a stifled sound that spoke volumes in the quiet. It was a reminder that I wasn't alone, that the unknown occupant was still there, just inches of painted metal separating us. The realization sent a shiver down my spine. The simultaneous fear of discovery and desire for rescue battled within me. I wanted to scream, to alert someone of my presence, but the fear of attracting the wrong kind of attention kept me silent. I felt like a mouse hiding from a prowling cat, where the slightest sound could be my undoing. Amidst the external chaos, my mind raced. Who was in the next stall? A student, a teacher, or the very reason for the lockdown? The thought was chilling. I was sharing my hiding spot with a potential menace, an unseen stranger whose intentions were unknown. The voices and footsteps outside grew fainter, moving away, leaving me once again in an unnerving silence. It was a temporary reprieve, a moment to catch my breath, but the tension never left. It clung to me like a second skin, a constant reminder of the precariousness of my situation. As I sat there, cramped and scared, I realized that my story could end in this forgotten bathroom, an unremarkable footnote in a day marked by terror. Or maybe, just maybe, I would walk out of here, a survivor scarred by an experience too close, too real. But the story wasn't over yet. The unknown threat next to me, the unseen menace, remained. And as the lockdown dragged on, the line between safety and danger blurred, leaving me in a limbo of fear and uncertainty. The silence was shattered by the sound of the bathroom door being pushed open with force. My heart stopped. Footsteps echoed on the tile floor, each step a thunderous sound in my heightened state of alertness. I braced myself, ready for the worst. But then a voice, authoritative and clear, pierced the air. "Clear," it called out. Another voice responded, "All clear here too." Relief flooded through me. But it was tinged with a wariness born of hours in fear. Cautiously, I unlocked the stall door and stepped out. My legs felt like jelly, barely able to support me. The bathroom was empty, except for the open window in the corner, with the curtain fluttering like a silent witness to an unseen escape. As I stood there, trying to process, officers entered. The look of surprise on their faces at seeing me was almost comical under different circumstances. They asked me questions, their words a blur as I tried to wrap my mind around what had just happened. It turned out the intruder had escaped through that small window, mere feet from where I had been hiding. This revelation sent a shiver down my spine. The threat had been so close, yet remained unseen, a ghostly presence that haunted the edges of my consciousness. In the days that followed, I became an unintentional focal point in the investigation and the media. My account of the events, my proximity to the intruder, made me a person of interest, a witness with a story to tell. But as I recounted my tale, I felt detached, as if talking about someone else's experience. The reality of it all seemed like a distant nightmare, one that I could recount but not fully grasp as my own. The intruder was never found. Their identity, a mystery that gnawed at the edges of my mind. Questions lingered in the air, unanswerable and haunting. Who were they? What had driven them to my school, to that bathroom? As life returned to its semblance of normalcy, I found myself changed. The halls of the school felt different. The echoes of laughter and chatter now overlaid with an undercurrent of something darker. I was a survivor. Yes, but survival came with its own shadows, ones that followed me in quiet moments, in the solitude that I once sought. The lockdown was over, but the sense of being trapped lingered, a psychological aftermath of the terror I had faced. The story of that day became a part of me, an open-ended chapter in the book of my life. The fear, the relief, the unresolved mystery, they melded into a haunting melody that played on, a reminder of the day when the mundane turned into a silent terror